You know that feeling when you're lying into bed at like 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, and you just start replaying that one stupid thing you said 5 years ago?
Yeah, the universal 3 a.m. fantasy.
Right.
It's a very specific kind of torture, honestly.
Exactly. We all have it. And you think, if I could just go back for 10 seconds, I could fix everything.
Right.
Whether it's fixing a high school embarrassment, saving a loved one from a bad decision, or, let's be honest, buying Bitcoin in 2010 when it was literally pennies.
Oh, absolutely.
We treat time travel as this ultimate undo button. It's this fantasy of total control. But today, we are diving into a stack of research that suggests time travel isn't really a magic eraser. It's more like a sledgehammer.
A sledgehammer is a very polite way of putting it, I think. We are looking at a collection of insights today titled The Temporal Tapestry: Physics, Ethics, and the Multiverse. And what struck me immediately about this material is that it just completely strips away the Hollywood gloss. It's not just about hopping in a DeLorean with the flux capacitor. It's about the fact that time isn't the straight arrow we intuitively think it is.
Right. The source material actually calls it a complex tapestry of possibilities. So our mission for this deep dive is to bridge the gap between the hard math, the quantum physics stuff, and the really messy reality of what would actually happen to your brain and, well, our history, if you actually pulled that lever.
And just a fair warning to everyone listening right now, the answers are darker, they're weirder, and much more complicated than just, going back and killing baby Hitler.
Totally. So let's start with the bedrock here, the physics. Because I think most people have a vague idea that Einstein is involved somehow, but the source material gets pretty specific about why time travel is theoretically possible. And it all hinges on space-time, right?
It does. And to really understand this, you have to throw out your basic intuition. We intuitively think of space as a stage where things happen like an empty room, and time is just a clock on the wall ticking away at the exact same speed for everyone, everywhere.
Right.
But Einstein's general relativity threw that entire concept out the window. He said space and time are actually woven together into a single pliable fabric. Space-time.
The classic analogy I always hear for this is the bowling ball on a trampoline.
Yeah, and it's classic because it really works. So imagine a trampoline sheet. That is space-time. If you put a heavy bowling ball right in the middle, representing a massive object like a planet or a star, it sinks down, it curves the fabric.
That creates a dip.
Exactly. That curvature is what we feel as gravity. But here is the kicker. It doesn't just curve space, it curves time.
Meaning time actually flows differently depending on where you are on that trampoline.
Precisely.
Yeah.
If you are deep in that curve, near a massive object, time literally moves slower for you than it does for someone just floating out in empty space.
Okay, so gravity bends time. But the source material jumps from bending time to, breaking it, or at least poking holes in it. And this is where wormholes come into play.
Right. Technically, in the literature, they're called Einstein-Rosen bridges. So imagine that fabric of space-time again. If you want to get from point A to point B, you normally have to walk all the way across the fabric. That takes a long time.
Yeah.
But if you could somehow fold the fabric over, so point A touches point B, and then punch a hole through both layers,
You instantly have a shortcut.
you have a wormhole. And the math actually suggests these shortcuts don't just bridge distance in space, they bridge time. You could theoretically step into one end and come out the other end 1,000 years in the past. Or the future. It's a tunnel straight through the tapestry.
But here is the problem, and the source is pretty clear about this. Wormholes are still entirely theoretical. We haven't found one. We haven't made one. We don't have a Stargate sitting in a secret government warehouse somewhere.
We don't, but, and this is the part that usually really surprises people, we have proven that time travel is real. Like, we've actually done it.
You're talking about time dilation.
Yes. This isn't just theoretical physics anymore. This is engineering reality. The source details the Halevel-Keating experiment from 1971. It's one of my absolute favorite anecdotes in science history because it is so mundane, yet totally mind-blowing.
Walk us through it.
So they took 4 atomic clocks. And these are clocks that are so accurate they don't lose a single second in millions of years.
So super precise. Not just the digital watch on my wrist.
Incredibly precise, way beyond that. And they put these clocks on regular commercial airliners and literally flew them around the world twice, once going eastward, once going westward. Meanwhile, they left identical atomic clocks sitting completely still on the ground at the U.S. Naval Observatory.
And when the planes finally landed,
The clocks did not match.
Wow.
The clocks on the planes had actually experienced a different amount of time than the clocks on the ground.
Okay, just to be super clear for the listener, this wasn't some mechanical error, right?
Hmm?
It wasn't that the clock shook on the plane and lost time.
No, not at all. The time itself was different. Because the planes were moving at high speed, and because they were at a different altitude, meaning they were experiencing slightly different gravity further away from the Earth's core, they traveled through time differently. The people on those planes traveled a few nanoseconds into the future relative to the people on the ground.
That is just wild to think about.
Mhm.
Every single time you get on a plane, you are technically a time traveler.
A very, very inefficient one, yes. But it absolutely proves the core concept. Speed and gravity manipulate time. If you could somehow build a ship that travels close to the speed of light, say 99.9%, and you went on a round trip for what felt like a year to you.
I'd come back to Earth and everyone I know would be dead.
Precisely. Hundreds of years could have passed on Earth while you only aged 1 year. That is forward time travel. It's a one-way ticket, but physics completely allows it. The real headache, though, the stuff that keeps physicists up at night, is going backward.
Because that's where all the standard rules just stop making sense. And the source material actually shifts gears here. It goes from relativity, which is the study of really big things like planets and stars, to quantum mechanics, the study of the incredibly tiny. Why the switch?
Because general relativity hates backward time travel. It basically breaks the math. It creates infinities and paradoxes that the equations just can't handle. But down in the quantum realm with subatomic particles, the rules of cause and effect get extremely fuzzy.
This is where they talk about superposition and entanglement.
Right. Superposition is this bizarre idea that a particle can exist in multiple states or locations at once until you actually measure it. And entanglement is what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, where two particles become linked instantly across vast amounts of space. The source argues that if we are ever going to build a machine that actually goes back in time, the key lies in exploiting these specific quantum weirdnesses.
But the very moment we talk about going back, we hit a massive brick wall. The paradox.
The grandfather paradox. It is the classic logical trap of time travel.
Let's just play it out for everyone listening, just to see how ridiculously messy it gets. So I build a time machine in my garage. I go back to 1920, and I accidentally run over my grandfather with the DeLorean before he ever meets my grandmother.
Okay, a bit morbid, but it's effective for the thought experiment.
Right. So because he dies, my father is never born, which means I am never born. But if I'm never born, I never exist to build the time machine. And if I never built the machine, I never went back to 1920 to kill him. So he lives, which means I am born.
And the loop just goes on forever. It's a total logical short circuit. Classical physics says this is flat out impossible. You cannot have an effect or death, essentially, that eliminates its own cause, which is your birth. It completely breaks causality.
But the source material offers a way out of this trap. And honestly, it's a solution that's arguably scarier than the paradox itself. They bring up the many-worlds interpretation.
Yes, MWI. This was proposed by Hugh Everett III back in the late 50s, and it's fascinating because it takes the really bizarre math of quantum mechanics entirely literally. It says that the universe doesn't just choose one outcome when a quantum event happens. It does all of them.
So applying that to the paradox we just talked about.
In the MWI view, when you go back and kill your grandfather, you haven't actually changed your past at all. You have simply arrived at a branching point. At the exact moment of the accident, reality itself splits.
Like a fork in the road.
Exactly. There is timeline A, the one you originally came from, where your grandfather lived, your dad was born, you were born, and you built a machine and left. That timeline continues to exist, perfectly safe and sound, but you have now created timeline B, a completely new reality where your grandfather died on that road, and you are now stuck in timeline B.
So I exist in timeline B, but I literally have no origin there. I'm essentially a cosmic refugee.
That is a brilliant way to put it. You're an anomaly. This completely solves the paradox because there's no logical contradiction anymore. Timeline A has a grandson. Timeline B does not. Both exist simultaneously within the multiverse.
I mean, that is comforting in a weird way. Just because it means you can't actually break the universe, but it is also terrifying. It implies that every single decision creates an entirely new universe.
Infinite universes, infinite versions of you. It highly suggests reality is so much more crowded than we could ever perceive.
And speaking of terrifying structures of reality, we definitely have to mention the block universe hypothesis that the source brings up. This one really messed with my head a bit while reading.
This is the theory that deeply challenges the core idea that time flows at all. We normally perceive time like a river. The past has gone downstream, the present is right here, and the future hasn't happened yet. The block universe says, imagine a giant block of ice. The entire block exists all at once. The past, the present, and the future are all just physical coordinates inside that solid block.
So the dinosaurs are still currently roaming around in their specific part of the block, and my great-great-grandchildren are already dead in theirs.
Yes. Everything is equally real and existing simultaneously. In this view, our consciousness is just a spotlight slowly moving through the block, illuminating one tiny slice at a time and calling it now.
But if that's true, then free will is a total illusion. The script is already completely written, and I'm just reading my lines without knowing it.
It is a very deterministic worldview. But let's assume, just for the sake of this deep dive, that we can actually change things, that we aren't just frozen bugs in a block of ice. That brings us straight to the ethics of interference.
The butterfly effect.
Chaos theory. The source uses that famous Ray Bradbury story, A Sound of Thunder, as the prime example. A hunter goes back to the Jurassic period, accidentally steps on a single butterfly, and comes back to his present. But now the English language is spelled differently, and a fascist dictator is in charge of the country.
It perfectly illustrates sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Just a tiny, seemingly irrelevant change back then ripples out into an absolute tsunami of changes today.
And this is exactly where the source poses its heaviest ethical questions. We all say, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and insert whatever terrible dictator here. It instinctively feels like the moral thing to do.
Right, it's basic utilitarianism. Sacrifice one terrible person to save millions of innocent lives. It seems like a no-brainer.
But the source argues heavily that because of the butterfly effect, you simply cannot know the outcome. Let's say you do remove that dictator. Does that just create a massive power vacuum? Does a much more competent, far more ruthless leader take his place? Or what if preventing that specific war leads to a massive population explosion, which causes a global famine a decade later that kills even more people?
It's the law of unintended consequences on steroids. You fix one thing and you end up breaking three others in ways you couldn't predict.
And there is an even deeper moral question the source raises here. Who made you God?
Yeah, who actually gives me the right to decide that this specific version of history is the wrong one?
Exactly. If you wipe out a timeline to fix it, you are effectively erasing the existence of billions of people who were born in that specific version of reality. You are committing a kind of temporal genocide just to create a world that matches your personal preferences.
That is such a heavy burden. It's not just fixing a mistake anymore, it's deciding who gets the right to exist.
And that immense pressure naturally leads us to a section of the source material that I found incredibly unique, because usually when we discuss this stuff, we talk about the machine, we rarely talk about the pilot.
The psychology of time travel.
The human cost, as they call it.
I love this section because in the movies, the hero comes back to the present. Maybe he's a little winded, he dusts himself off, and he's totally fine. But the source suggests that real-time travel would be psychologically shattering. They use the term temporal displacement.
Just imagine the intense sensory dissonance. Your internal biological clock says it's a random Tuesday morning, and your body is 30 years old.
Right.
You step out of the machine, and the star constellations are slightly different. The air literally smells different because of different industrial levels. The language is drifted, so you can barely understand anyone. It's the ultimate jet lag, but it's an existential jet lag.
Plus the actual trauma of what you might witness. The source explicitly mentions the observer effect in a psychological sense. Like if you go back to observe a historical war zone, reading about a battle in a dry history book is attached. But actually standing there, smelling the smoke, hearing the actual screams of the wounded, that deeply stays with you.
And then there is what they call the foreknowledge burden. Imagine going back to the day before the Titanic sinks. You're walking around the deck, you're seeing families laughing, children playing on the ship, and you absolutely know that they are all going to die in less than 24 hours.
And because of the butterfly effect we just talked about, you might be totally terrified to warn them. If you save the Titanic, does the CEO of the company that owns it go on to do something far worse because he didn't face that failure? You'd be completely paralyzed by indecision.
It would genuinely be a living hell. And then there is the multiverse identity crisis. This is the one that really got under my skin.
Is this the part about meeting your other self?
Yes. If the many worlds interpretation is true and you travel to an alternate timeline, there is almost certainly already a you living out their life there.
That would just be so awkward.
It's way more than awkward. It's psychologically fracturing. What if you meet yourself and that version of you is way more successful? They're happier, they're richer. Or conversely, what if they are a convicted criminal?
Yeah.
You are suddenly confronted with the very visceral reality that you are just a product of random circumstances. Your entire core sense of identity, this idea that I am inherently this kind of person, just completely crumbles.
The source actually suggests that future astronauts, or chrononauts, I guess, would need dedicated time travel therapy.
Like, Doc, I met myself and I'm a total jerk in the other timeline.
Or, I met myself and I'm happily married to the person who dumped me in this timeline. I mean, that would just crush you.
Exactly. How do you possibly reintegrate into your own mundane life after seeing that? It forces you to realize that your current life is literally just one random roll of the cosmic dice.
It's really interesting that we tend to treat all these issues as modern scientific puzzles, but the source points out that humanity has been wrestling with this long before quantum physics ever existed.
Absolutely. Segment 5 of the deep dive looks closely at time travel in culture. Humans have quite literally always been obsessed with the flow of time.
They mention Chronos, the Greek personification of time,
Mm.
but I was really drawn to the Eastern examples they provided, like the Japanese folklore story of Urashima Taro.
That is a striking ancient parallel to the relativity experiments we were discussing earlier. In the myth, a fisherman goes to a magical underwater kingdom on the back of a turtle. He stays there for what feels like just 3 days. But when he returns to his home village, everything is gone. His house has turned to dust. His family has been dead for generations. 300 years have actually passed on the surface.
That is literally the plot of Interstellar. It's ancient time dilation.
Exactly. It shows that this deep intuition that time can somehow flow differently for different observers is ancient. It's baked into our psychology. But the source makes a really fascinating distinction here between how Eastern and Western cultures view time generally.
Right. Western culture heavily tends to view time as completely linear, a straight line from point A to point B. It's something to be conquered or managed or spent. We deeply obsess over productivity and saving time.
And consequently, our time travel stories are almost always about control. Back to the Future Avengers. The timeline broke, let's go back and fix it. We fundamentally want to dominate the timeline.
Whereas the Eastern philosophies they mention, like the Hindu concept of Kalachakra,
The Wheel of Time.
right, it views time as entirely cyclical, creation, destruction, and rebirth, over and over. In that specific worldview, going back to violently fix a mistake is kind of missing the whole point of existence. The cycle itself is inevitable. You are meant to understand the flow, not try to dam the river.
I think that's why modern movies like Arrival or Tenet feel so radically different to Western audiences. They really play with that sense of fatalism or circularity. It's much less about winning against time and more about accepting your place within it.
It definitely reflects our modern anxieties. We live in a world that feels very fragile right now. They bring up Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle, which explores an alternate history where the Axis powers actually won World War II. We consume that kind of media because we are deeply terrified of how easily things could have gone the other way.
It's our collective way of processing the endless what-ifs. So looking forward to practical applications. The source wraps up with a section on the future. Is any of this ever actually going to happen, or are we just permanently stuck with the sci-fi movies?
Well, the hosts in the source material get super excited about the prospect of time travel tourism.
Oh, I know.
I mean, who wouldn't? Come see the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Tickets on sale now. I would empty my bank account for that.
But the expert in the text, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, pours a lot of cold water on that dream. The engineering hurdles are just prohibitive right now.
Give it to me straight. How bad is it?
It's the energy requirement. To physically stabilize a wormhole, to keep that temporal throat open long enough for a human being to actually walk through it without being crushed, you need something called negative energy or exotic matter. And we don't just not have it. We don't even know if it can physically exist in the massive quantities we would need. We are talking about harnessing the total energy output of a star and compressing it into a doorway.
So no weekend getaways to the Jurassic period anytime soon.
Not anytime soon. However, they do offer a really interesting glimmer of hope: quantum computing.
How does a really fast computer help us physically travel through time?
Well, we are currently using advanced quantum computers to actively simulate these time travel scenarios. We can essentially create incredibly complex digital environments where we reverse the flow of quantum information. So it's not physical time travel where you put your body in a machine, but it allows us to rigorously test the paradoxes. We're basically running the software simulations to see if the universe breaks before we ever try to build the hardware.
That is incredibly smart. But the source raises one final ethical red flag about the whole tourism idea, even if we could do it. Let's say we somehow solve the exotic matter energy problem. If we turn human history into a commercial vacation spot,
It massively commodifies tragedy. That is the huge ethical concern. Imagine a wealthy tour group showing up at Pompeii 5 minutes before the volcano erupts. They're eating popcorn, they're taking selfies, all while real historical people are screaming and about to die in agony.
that is such a grim, visceral image.
It turns real human suffering into a sanitized theme park attraction. It completely disconnects us from historical empathy. If you can just infinitely rewind and rewatch history like a Netflix show, does human life lose its fundamental weight?
It connects right back to that responsibility argument we talked about earlier. Just because we have the technology to look doesn't automatically mean we should.
Exactly. It's the ultimate form of historical voyeurism.
So, to synthesize all of this for you listening, we started off thinking time travel was just this cool, harmless sci-fi fantasy. We found out that real physics actually allows it, at least the forward-moving kind, with time dilation. We looked at the dizzying concept of the multiverse, where every single choice spawns an entirely new reality. And we realized that changing the past is an absolute ethical minefield and incredibly dangerous psychologically.
It is a massive amount of information to take in. But I really think the core underlying message of this source material isn't actually about time travel at all.
What do you mean by that?
It's entirely about the present moment.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, if the many worlds interpretation is true, or even if just the basic butterfly effect is true in our own single universe, it means that every single thing you do matters on a cosmic scale.
Because every single choice literally sends the universe branching down a different path.
Exactly. You are already a time traveler. You are traveling into the future at a rate of 1 second at a time. And with every single word you speak, every small decision you make, you are actively selecting which timeline you are going to live in tomorrow. We are constantly actively shaping reality.
Wow. That definitely puts a lot more weight on my decision of what I'm going to have for lunch today.
It really should. But I also think it's deeply empowering. You aren't just a passive observer trapped in the block universe. You are the active architect of your own timeline.
That is a profoundly powerful place to land. But the source material leaves us with one final, very provocative question. And I think this is the absolute perfect thing to leave you, our listener, with today to ponder on your own.
Yes, it's a deep question of personal identity and regret.
Go for it. Lay it on us.
The question is this: if you actually had the power to change a single profound regret in your past, that one exact thing that keeps you up at 3 a.m., but you absolutely knew that doing so would instantly erase the radio, you that exists right now to create a brand new person, would you still do it?
Would you trade your current consciousness, your hard-won memories, the specific person you have become, warts and all, for a potentially better life that technically someone else gets to live?
It truly forces you to sit down and ask, do I actually value my own existence, or do I just value the idea of a perfect life?
That is definitely going to haunt me for a while. A huge thank you to the authors of The Temporal Tapestry for completely breaking our brains today, and thank you all for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep asking those big questions.
See you in the future.